So good evening, everyone, and welcome to the virtual 2020 Equine Industry Symposium. So before we begin, we would like to thank everyone who made this night possible. So thank you to Equestrian Canada, Ontario Equestrian, and the EIS Organizing Committee for tonight's event, as well as all the speakers and students for making this week all possible. This event was organized by Camille Richard, Sarah Ashby, Nikki Massari, Julia Oosterveld, and myself, Laura Wright. We are all second-year students at the University of Guelph studying in the Bachelor of Bioresource Management program, majoring in equine management. The Equine Industry Symposium is an educational and informational tool used to engage all sectors of the equine industry and connect us through common interests. This year's theme of the Equine Industry Symposium is resilience. We have chosen this theme because COVID-19 has affected us all in many ways. We're going to do a recap of the previous days. So to recap the amazing week we've had so far, Monday discussed the current impacts that COVID-19 has had on the equine community. Tuesday discussed how to restructure your business for success. Wednesday discussed the welfare of our horses while dealing with pressures presented by the current impact. Preparedness and equine traceability. And then Friday, which tonight is the final night of the Equine Symposium, we will be discussing the pandemic positives, or also known as the silver linings. Throughout the night, our speakers will be informing us on how their organizations are helping the equine industry move forward through the pandemic.
Please note that your cameras and microphones have been disabled for the duration of the presentations. We encourage you to share any questions or comments during the presentations through the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and our speakers will have a chance to answer them during the Q&A session at the end. Please note that this session is being recorded and will be available on the horse portal following the symposium.
For the Herd is an emergency fundraising initiative run through Ontario Equestrian. For the Herd raises funds for school horses in Ontario to cover the basic costs of care if the business is unable to do so on their own as a result of the pandemic. All the donated money is given back to individuals with the greatest need. I would also like to let the Equestrian Canada certified coaches know that by attending the symposium, you can claim updating hours for maintenance of your certification. Information on where to find and submit the form will be presented on your screen as we speak and can be found on our Facebook and Instagram pages. Our MC for this evening will be Akaash Maharaj. He is the CEO of the Mosaic Institute and leads the strengthening of pluralism within societies and peace between countries. He's an active volunteer. He has taught adult literacy. Akaash has served on a range of international and local community boards and has been particularly involved with the UNICEF's efforts on childhood welfare. He is fluent in English and French and was a national equestrian athlete for Canada. He was a triple gold medalist at the International Championships of Equestrian Skill at Arms. Akaash continues to work on employing horses to build bridges between urban and rural communities, as well as between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Canadians. Akaash has been a moderator for the past 4 equine industry symposiums, and we have the honor of having Akaash continue as our moderator for this evening. Thanks so much, Akaash.
Thank you very much, Laura. And thank you to everyone who has organized this week's symposium. I think that we all recognize that this has been a monumental undertaking. You've carried it off very well, and I suspect that you're all going to heave a huge sigh of relief at the end of tonight's proceedings. We'll begin this evening, with Kristy House. Kristy is Equestrian Canada's Manager of Welfare and Industry, where she works on the Federation's Equine Identification, Traceability, and Animal Care Assessment Program, which she described to us during our session yesterday evening. She is an alumna of the University of Guelph at its Campville campus, so she has very much come home this evening. She studied agriculture management with a focus on horses. She's worked for the Canadian Sheep Federation as a groom and as a barn manager, amongst other roles. And she will speak with us this evening about Equestrian Canada's activities and responsibilities in moving our industry forward. It's over to you, Kristy.
Perfect. So in my presentation tonight, I'm just going to go over a little bit of the initial response to the COVID-19 from the national standpoint for the horse industry, and some of the silver linings that have clearly come out of what we learned along the way, and then a bit about where we are today and where we're headed. So as Akaash mentioned, I am the Manager of Welfare and Industry at Equestrian Canada. To break it down a little bit further, I'm responsible for our agriculture government relations, so mainly dealing with CFIA and the various departments there, Canadian Border Services, AAFC, and the Veterinary Drug Directorate. As well as I'm responsible for the industry programs such as traceability and welfare, including for industry in the national herd, as well as in sport with Equestrian Canada sanctioned competition. So I do act as the staff liaison for the Equine Industry Development Committee, as well as the Health and Welfare Committee. I'm also the liaison for our national affiliates or our national equine organizations, such as Standardbred Canada, Canadian Warm Blood Horse Association, and CQHA or Canadian Quarter Horse Association. So I'm just going to take you over a little bit of some of the key actions that happened. So on March 18th, I believe, was the first letter that was sent from my office to Minister Bibeau's office at Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. As well as we did have corresponding letters going to the Minister of Heritage from the Sport Department to start to discuss the potential impacts to the industry and the type of problems that we were seeing coming ahead. So if you tuned into my presentation last night, you know that there was obviously an automatic need for data, for capacity, and understanding the type of impacts we were talking about, at which point we released a survey out into the industry to try to get a better understanding of not only the timing, the type of impacts, where people were standing today, and what kind of relief would be needed to support them given what we knew at the time, which obviously has extended far beyond what we had ever imagined. But for the short term, we were looking for support to help get businesses through. With the survey results, they were brought in-house for an initial assessment, and at which time we brought on Wilton Consulting Group. So if you tuned in on Monday night, you were able to hear from Bronwyn, who was able to help analyze the results and consolidate the information and support us on the development of the response to COVID-19 for Active Equine Summary Report, which was submitted to not only AAFC, but the Heritage, as well as Finance and a few other departments. From there, the response from AAFC was to create an equine industry advisory panel and working group where we got together to review all of the impacts to the industry that we were aware of, what we were asking for in terms of support and relief. And at which point we brought on Grassroots Public Affairs, which is an advocacy-based group from Ontario, who expanded our bandwidth for engaging with government and public relations. So we then launched our advocacy campaign and a letter writing campaign, both from members of the industry, but from Equestrian Canada, and reaching out to as many MPs as possible. So we did have ongoing engagement with MPs, and there is a full list on the website in terms of who we talked to, as well as their support and what some of their commitments were. And at the same time did many different media engagements, including CTV National News, the Globe and Mail, and a few other agriculture-based interviews. We were able to make a presentation to the House of Commons Finance and Agriculture Committee on the impacts to the sector. And since then, we have been in ongoing conversations, both with the federal and provincial governments within Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, about not only the COVID-19 impacts and the response that needed, but some of those key underlying issues that both Bronwyn and Danielle highlighted on Monday that are impacting their ability to respond for us. So up on the screen here, you can just see a few of screenshots from the Equestrian Canada website, where you can learn more about the campaign, how you can get involved, how you can reach out to your MPs, as well as some resources like operation support, financial health, and a full list of our publications to date. Additionally, we knew it was essential that we had to get the industry together and come up with a framework for reopening. We felt it was very important that we supported the industry and being able to be included in that first phase of businesses that were reopening after initial lockdowns. So we did pull together a group of business owners and operators across the country to develop the COVID-19 Return to Business Operations Framework. As soon as it was established, it was released out into the field, but it was also sent to federal and provincial governments to help demonstrate that we were ready, could be trusted, and the implementation of the framework was practical and would keep both human and horses safe. In addition to that, there was a return to competition guidelines set out. We knew that there was, among all the other impeding welfare issues that COVID-19 presented, on the sport side of things, we were working very hard to make sure that competitions could resume across the country as well. However, in knowing that in many provinces and regions, owners and riders may have not had access to their horses, and horses could have been out of competition for an extended period of time, we compiled a panel of experts, including Dr. Hilary Clayton, as well as Dr. Yves Rosé, Dr. Alan Manning, Dr. Han Renrickson, trainer and coach and EC Jumping Youth Development Program Advisor, Dayton Gorsling, as well as 3 EC support staff to develop the return to competition guidelines for the sport horse following a break in training. And up on here, you can just see one of the screenshots from that document, which is the fitness level decision tree, which was developed to help people returning to the barn, returning into training, establish what their baseline fitness was, and be able to move from there to help prep for competition and return to competition. From that development came the online training program in our eCampus, Conditioning the Sport Horse, which is based on Dr. Hilary Clayton's book. She was a key contributor to both the development of the guidelines, but also to the online training course and its content. And we are very excited to have it launched and hope to be able to create more courses to support this one and further training on conditioning the sport horse. So if you do have an EC sport license, you can just log in and be able to sign up for the course. If not, you can sign up to enter the campus without purchasing a sport license, but there is a bit of a difference in the fees for the courses if you don't have an active sport license. So there were some key themes that came out in terms of silver linings for the work that was done, for the collaboration that happened, and most importantly, for the communication with the industry. We had collaboration across the board, from federal governments, from provinces, provincial governments, industry members, national affiliates, and multi-sector that we wouldn't normally be engaging with on such a frequent basis, including racing and the other agriculture organizations, but more importantly, the general farm organizations and the media. So as you can see, just a few screenshots up here of the type of media attention that the sector was getting. And this was everywhere from riding schools to racing, as well as therapeutic barns. So there were lots of different faces sitting around lots of different tables that normally wouldn't be together, but that were working together to help further the businesses of everybody who had been impacted. Additionally, the industry and the importance of the equine industry and its recognition was very much heightened. I have a screenshot up here of a few of the different MPs who really were supportive through the process and were a bit of champions. Additionally, I think within Equestrian Canada industry, and I'm probably not shy to say this in front of this crowd, had not always been a priority, but throughout the pandemic, it was full organizational support to help do whatever we can to help support the businesses, the horses, and the people that were being impacted by what we were going through. I think with the federal government, there was a recognition and a willingness to collaborate and listen that was not there before. And that wasn't either fault of their own, it's the situation had brought it up. And we had to work together in order to address the issues at hand and the potential welfare issues coming down. And then with the general farm organizations, you heard from Danielle on Monday, but we really were supported, most importantly by OFA. They were a huge supporter of Equestrian Canada's work and helped with a lot of the advocacy work that we were doing, but some of the other general farm organizations across the country as well, speaking up and recognizing how important equine is in agriculture in Canada. Another silver lining is some of those historical legislative issues that Bronwyn and Danielle covered on Monday really came to light. the government wanted to help us. They truly did, but there were some common prerequisites that there was not an easy fix to. There was not an easy way to work around. And we found ourselves in that situation of, okay, well, where do we fit? So sport and tourism and agriculture, and everybody's trying to say, well, we're the group that's going to help take care of this. And I will have to commend AAFC for their ongoing collaboration and their willingness to help us in whichever way they can. So because of some of those classification issues and the farm registration numbers that are hard to access and the ability to demonstrate farm income, we had an inability to access those pre-developed and available business risk management programs that the provinces deliver on behalf of the federal AAFC department. So because they became to light, they became a priority. And still the momentum of those priorities, both within the Organization of Equestrian Canada, but within AAFC, are still there. We're still working to sort through them and to move them along, and we are meeting on a regular basis to help address those issues. And I think that although it wasn't the ideal setting, it really brought it to the point where we now have to act, and we have to get this done, and we have to figure out how we can avoid being in a situation like this in the future. Another silver lining that came to light was some of the leadership weaknesses that I know we are all familiar with. Certainly within Equestrian Canada, the resources and focuses on industry were not where they should have been in order to help us react where we have been, but the organization all pulled together and supported the industry, and we were all working from the same team, whether we were working on sport or industry. And I think it really brought to light within the organization how we need to set a better plan to fill some of those leadership gaps in the future, including things like lack of education around business support and farm business support, but also advocacy training for staff and industry members. One of the biggest challenges we had in launching a national advocacy campaign is it's not as common for the equine sector to advocate to the government the way it is in some of the other livestock sectors where it comes so naturally to them as farmers to engage in advocacy plans. So those all really came to fruition and have now supported a plan to address those gaps moving forward. And as much as I've said the word advocacy today, I think what 90% of the time spent was with government educating on the sector, educating on what is considered primary agriculture, what is considered secondary agriculture, and what would be considered private and recreational use. It wasn't a willingness to not help, it was a willingness to understand better. We are not like the other livestock sectors in terms of our clear supply chain is not there. We change all the time. Horses can remain unfinished or in production for 90% of their life. So we had to spend a lot of time drilling it down and making a clear way that we can demonstrate how to know when it is a commercial farm business versus a private use or recreational business. And that is part of where those active equine facilities and active equine definitions came from. So we spent a lot of time talking about who we are, how we work, what fits where, how to define us, and how to subsector us when necessary. I think that there has been some progress there, but that is going to be ongoing, both on the government and the industry side. So similar to what I talked about earlier on the last slide, we were able to really educate the government on what is producing a horse through its life cycle. And I use the word producing just because that is a common word in agriculture, and that's what I'm trying to relate to right now. But it really is the raising, developing, and maintaining of a horse that generate income for a farm business. And a farm business is a business that takes place on a farm, uses farm inputs, and is on agricultural land, which for the majority of our commercial businesses, that would be the case. So I'll leave you with this. We've established a path forward. We're going to have to continue to collaborate. We're going to have to continue to work together. We may have to sit at tables that once would be uncomfortable and have conversations that we don't totally want to have. And for the most part, put trust in groups that maybe the trust has been broken. But I think if we can continue to collaborate, we can continue to be honest, and we can continue to be respectful, we can really address some of these common issues and move the industry forward for the better in the future. Although nobody wants to wish a global pandemic, I think there are some subtle silver linings within this for the industry, and I hope that we can take the lessons learned, and there were some serious hard ones, and use them to improve the sector as we move ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristy, for providing such valuable information regarding the government actions taken during the pandemic and how to further educate our government officials in terms of the equine industry. As a token of our thanks and appreciation for your time and effort, a donation of $50 will be donated to For the Herd in your name.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Our next speaker will be Tracey McCague-McElrae. She is the Executive Director of Ontario Equestrian. Tracey was born and raised on a dairy farm and has fond memories of riding lessons with Adele and Dick Rockwell in Aurora, Ontario. She is a graduate of York University with a Bachelor of Arts in Kinesiology, specializing in sport administration. Before joining Ontario Equestrian, Tracey was the Senior Director of Business Development at Guelph, Ontario, and Executive Director at Skate Ontario, and a partner at Carrot Creative Event Management and Marketing. She will speak to us this evening about Ontario Equestrian's activities and responsibilities in moving our industry forward. Over to you, Tracey.
Thanks, everyone. And a really big thank you to the University of Guelph and Equine Guelph for organizing this. It's a big feat, and I think we're in good hands. These students have been remarkable and incredibly professional. So I just want to thank you for putting this together. So I'm going to talk tonight a little bit. First off, I'm going to talk about Ontario Equestrian and actually who we are. I'm going to talk about the community as a whole, about communication and data and how important those two things are in terms of learnings out of the pandemic, and speed and adaptability and how we've learned a lot of lessons around moving quickly, and then just professionalizing and professionalism of all parts of the sector. And finally, my favorite topic, and that's being very facetious, technology. So Ontario Equestrian, for those of you, probably most of you know, but Ontario Equestrian is the not-for-profit provincial sport organization. And we're formally recognized by the Ministry of Heritage, Sport, Tourism and Culture as the governing body for equestrian sport in Ontario. And our primary function is to develop programs for athletes, coaches and officials in equestrian sport. The government really looks to us to make sure that we're adhering to safety standards and that we're operating in an effective and safe way, that we're meeting all the national standards put out by Equestrian Canada for program delivery, and that we're delivering a high quality, world-class program for our members, that our coaches and officials are certified, and that we're establishing all risk management policies in terms of discipline, harassment, safe sport, concussion training. It's a big responsibility, and you have to work hand in hand with your national sport governing body, which in this case is Equestrian Canada. And just for your information, there's 63 recognized provincial sport governing bodies in Ontario. So everything from softball to hockey to badminton to equestrian sport. And I have spent my whole life in sport, and obviously every sport thinks they're unique, and they are in their own way, but there are still a lot of similarities among all of the sports. But I think one of the biggest things that's very challenging and very different and also incredible is the diversity and the massive number of organization and branches that feed into equestrian sport at a national and a provincial and a regional, local, all the businesses, all the educational institutions and government. That I think was one of the biggest things that came out during the pandemic, was just all the branches and all of the organizations that fed into what we needed to do as an organization. So we're a little bit different than other sports in that we don't have a quote unquote club system. And this was one of the big things that came out of the pandemic as well. So if you take, for example, gymnastics, there's gymnastics clubs, and that's a really easy communication tool for Ontario Gymnastics to talk to all their clubs and communicate. But in equestrian sport, we have lots of farms and businesses that run similar to the way a club would in other sports, but they're not necessarily affiliated, they're private businesses. So that became a little bit of a challenge very quickly, and it was interesting because at the same time we had just decided one of our weakest areas was our facility program, and working with all the barns and stables to assist them and to collaborate. And we had just finished late in 2019 to start a process to incubate 10 facilities to start to work on a really innovative, creative new facility program that we're hoping to launch actually in 2021. But I stole this slide from Danielle Glantz, who spoke on Monday night. But most sports only deal with the Ministry of Heritage, Sport, Tourism, and Cultural Industries. And in equestrian, we deal with significantly more. So I was working with the 63 other sports to lobby the Ministry of Heritage, Sport, Tourism, and Culture to try to get as much relief and assistance as we could for sport. But you can see in that catchment, and that's a very small ministry, we're also with tourism. And as we all know, probably one of the sectors that was hit hardest was the tourism sector in the pandemic. So we were at the table and we were working really hard to lobby for sport, but sport was feeling it, but not feeling it as badly as tourism. So we've worked really hard as a sector, but it's tough slugging when you're part of that ministry. I'll just give you an example though. We were feeling sorry for ourselves a little bit that equestrian was being hit so hard. And then I was on a call with some of the other sports, and soccer last summer, their registration normally in Ontario was about 370,000. And this year during the pandemic, their registration was 34,000. So we had some major challenges, but there are other sports that had significantly larger challenges to overcome. And as Kristy said, and the leadership at Equestrian Canada was phenomenal. Kristy worked incredibly hard. And I think she's moved the needle a lot. The provinces tried to rally and help. We have minimal staff on that side. So at Ontario Equestrian, we relied on an incredible group of board members to help with the lobby and advocacy as well. And they did a lot of work. And we've been working provincially to try to make the case as well for the working equine. One of the things that one of the learnings and one of the things going forward is that came to light, I think bigger than anything, was that data is king, and we don't have enough of it, and we don't have current data, and we need to get on top of that, and we need to put in mechanisms where we can track and continue to stay on top of data in equestrian sport. That's what's going to help us. That's what's going to help us in lobby efforts. That's what's going to help us with sponsorship. Data is king, and we really need to look at technology and ways to ensure that we can collect data. And I guess just in speaking to the community, when we're asking for data, we're using it for greater good, and we need a cooperation and assistance from anybody that can help us when we're putting out surveys and asking for information. And this is, I think, a major focus going forward, but it really brought to light how important data is. So one of the things that came to light again very quickly was our need to assist with the working equines. And it was Jen Sweet who started very quickly putting together a fundraiser to help with the schoolie horses. And this is where I talk about speed and adaptability and how quickly we needed to move while we were doing a lot of other things, but there was no choice. And I think that's a good learning going forward. You can make things happen really quickly when you need to, and we need to keep that in mind. But the pandemic and the shutdown started around March 17th. And we had had the conversations, rallied the troops, Our marketing department with Brandon Hall worked tirelessly to get the website and everything in the inner workings going, and the GoFundMe page to get the campaign launched on April 25th. So that's quick movement for a very large project. And I've got to say the community rallied, and you rallied in amazing ways. It was spectacular to see. And just to give you some thoughts on the campaign, we were looking for monetary donations. We were looking for supplies. We were looking for people to foster lesson horses. And we were also looking for people to spread the word about the campaign so that it would continue to grow. So to date, it's raised about $207,000, and then we've distributed $207,000. So Ontario Equestrian invested in the infrastructure and all the work to do behind the scenes. And we put together a dynamo fund distribution committee. And we had a lot of help from the University of Guelph and Equine Guelph. We couldn't have done all this work without them, and they were incredible supporters throughout this campaign. But the money came in, and the fund distribution committee met, and the money went out, and it usually went out within 2 days. So we were really nimble, and we got money out fast. But I'll tell you that this $207,000 was a drop in the bucket in terms of what the actual need was. So that was eye-opening, and we were continually doing surveys out and getting information from the farms that needed assistance. So the total number of barns that actually applied for assistance was 108. But again, goes back to data. The challenge was we didn't know the barns. We started trying to put databases together and pull databases together. I think we got up to about 380 barns that we were communicating with, but that's not even that's a very small percentage of the barns that have working equines. So communication and data and just helping people in need was a bit of a challenge. So the total number of barns that actually received funding of the 108 were 90, and they might have received it multiple times, because once they put their information in, and we asked for a lot of information, and the fund distribution committee did an incredible job. They were very diligent in how they collected information and how they figured out who the funding should go to. So some of the farms received funding multiple times. Every time that we did a fund distribution, every barn was looked at. So 90 barns received funding, and some of those would have received multiple times. The applications were numbered so that there was no bias from the people on the fund distribution committee. And again, we've kind of kept them quiet, or we haven't told people who was on that committee, but it was a great cross-section of people, and they worked really hard to make sure that they did as much as they could for as many farms as we could. There was a lot of generous offerings from in-kind donations, and we got those out again as quickly as we could, and 32 barns received generous in-kind donations from the community. So out of adversity always comes opportunity, and I'm a firm believer in the fact that this is not about this is about moving forward in a positive way, but learning from our things that are a deficit and moving it forward really progressively. I think we need to not think about change, but think about this more as change than recovery. I don't think we have to recover from this. I think we have to change in positive ways forward to make us stronger coming out of the pandemic. So a few of the areas I think that need additional professionalism and to be elevated to the next level, and we've been working on this with Equestrian Canada and the rest of the provinces, but coaching I think is one of the areas, and we are about to launch coach licensing. But coaches need to be certified, coaches need mentors, coaches need professional development, and the licensing is a great way to kind of start that movement. We're one of the few sports that don't make it mandatory for coaches to be certified, and that needs to change and that needs to stop. And we're going to work with the coaches, and we're going to really elevate coaching as a profession. Another area that I think it's become clearer through the pandemic, and I think there's huge opportunity, is to work on this new facility program. So initially Ontario Equestrian was going to work on it on our own, but now we're going to join forces with Equestrian Canada, and it's going to be a really comprehensive program that I think will really help facilities and barns move forward through this change and through the tough times that we've just come through. And it'll be collective marketing and promotions and financial management. We've already started that with Sean Jones and with the portal with Guelph, and human resources management and technology and business registration, and getting barns understanding what they need to do so that they can access government programs going forward, and so that they can elevate their businesses and make sure that we're ready for something like this should it ever happen again. But I think there's a huge opportunity with the facility program, and we're super excited to be working on it. And then there was a lot of innovation, and I don't want to point any one facility out, but there was tons of innovation, and we were one of the lucky sports. Golf and equestrian were on the, and that wasn't by accident. We lobbied hard. Equestrian Canada lobbied hard to make sure that we were allowed to be back as soon as we could. And we were one of the few sports that were, and a lot of facilities said they were, as soon as the lessons opened again, they were full, and they didn't have enough schooling horses, and they were buying horses, and they had a lot of boys signing up for the program when they never had boys before. So, those are the kinds of things that through a pandemic, people are looking at new sports because sports are being shut down, and the opportunity is not there. I feel sorry for my friends in volleyball and basketball and places where they need access to indoor facilities and gyms that are permitted by cities. And I think it also provided opportunities for different formats. So things like, Zoom, and we worked hard with our GRIP program athletes too. We had to totally change the program, and we did it in a matter of weeks. Did a lot of Zoom things. We did a lot of speakers. It was just a different way we had to start doing things, and we have to be much more innovative. And it was really time to pause and time to not get into that cycle of competition. And, I've come from a sport background with a lot of different sports, and nobody competes as much as equestrians. And I think it was time for people to really focus on training and fundamentals. And I hope people really took advantage of that because you don't get that very often in sport where you can really focus on that. So there were a lot of really positive people that talked to us. I think at the height of the crazy period from, middle of March to middle of May, our office was getting anywhere between 250 and 500 phone calls and messages a day. It was insanity. And, we were trying to keep up, but it was really challenging. So I think there's lots of opportunities to do things in new ways and learnings from other facilities, and we'll try to capture all that in the new facility program. And then on the technology side, one thing that's incredibly exciting is the launch of the EC campus. And EC has launched the campus. Ontario Equestrian members will have access to the campus when they sign up this year for their membership. It's actually going to be opened up at the end of next week. And for Ontario Equestrian members, their concussion training and their safe sport training will be part of their learnings, and they'll be part of the campus. And then we're going to continue to develop and put things on the campus in terms of developing for programming for sport, and all of our coaching learning will be on the campus. And we're going to really focus on that kind of technology, which is really important going forward. Lots of work to do there, and lots of a huge investment. This is one of our grit riders, and this pretty much sums it up to me, because it's definitely been a gritty time. It's been a roll up your sleeves and make things happen. There's been incredible coming together of the community, and we need to thank everyone for all the support for Ontario Equestrian and for the herd program. I think we need to stop thinking about innovation as one side of our desk, but we need to look at it as a way forward. Slicing and siloing and segmenting ourselves make us actually minimize our resilience as a community. And I think the pandemic's really brought that to light, and you know, we've worked hard. I think it's got to be cohesiveness versus competitiveness, and we need to have innovation on the ground. We really need to think strategically and be smart business people going forward, and it's really come to light. So we need to come out stronger. This needs to be about change, as I mentioned, not recovery. Resilience is important. We need to ensure that our businesses are sustainable, and that equine businesses need preparedness strategies, and that they're ready to go and it's embedded in their daily operation. We need government support, and we need government to understand exactly what we are as a sector and what we bring to the table. And I think that conversation is really moving forward. And I would really like to thank Equestrian Canada for all the hard work they've done there. And I think that I'm excited. I'm excited about new programming and new things that are going to move forward. And we're going to do it together. And, you know, we really value the support that you give us as a community. And we don't take that lightly, and we work hard on your behalf to try to be innovative and move things forward. So I just finally like to thank the Board of Ontario Equestrian and the staff, because they worked super hard through the pandemic, and they will continue to work hard on your behalf. So thank you very much, and looking forward to the next stage with the movement forward.
Thank you, Tracey, for discussing the importance and impact that Ontario Equestrian has amongst our equestrian community. As a token of our thanks and appreciation for your time and effort, a donation of $50 will be made to For the Herd in your name.
Thank you.
The Equine Information Source team consists of 3 students from Guelph's Bachelor Bioresource Management program who major in equine management: Amanda St-Onge, Kaylee Copeland, and Elizabeth Crouchman. Amanda is a third-year student who grew up in British Columbia and plans to return to BC after completing her degree to become part of a zoo therapy business. I suppose she doesn't care for Ontario winters. Kaylee is also a third-year student who has been working with and riding in the hunter-jumper industry for 11 years. Elizabeth is a graduate of the Equine Management program with more than 14 years experience caring and working with horses. These 3 students spent the summer researching and compiling resources for horse owners and facility managers to help us through the pandemic challenges. The Equine Information Source will present some highlights of their work. Over to you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Amanda, and tonight my team and I will be presenting to you all the research we did with Dr. Murky's over the summer. As we all know, this pandemic has been hard, and adjusting to the new way of doing things isn't easy, especially in the equine industry. We are the Equine Information Source. Our mission this summer was to help horse communities across Ontario and Canada to deal with the new situation and to be better prepared for the risk factors associated with COVID-19 in our horse communities. One of the first things we knew we had to address when creating our content was biosecurity. Biosecurity is a very familiar word to many in the horse community when it comes to our equids. But with COVID-19, we had to take that philosophy and turn it on its head to focus on biosecurity for humans. As we all know, people in the horse industry have a tendency to think about their horse's welfare long before even considering their own. This is why it's important for us to help horse owners see how they can keep themselves and others safe without compromising the welfare and daily maintenance of their horses. The Equine Information Source was vigilant about keeping up to date with the latest scientific research regarding COVID and making sure that all of our recommendations were in accordance with those of the CDC, Health Canada, and the science that back them.
One of the first projects we worked on regarding biosecurity was making infographics for the community. Infographics get information across to people in a way that is eye-catching and quick to take in. We worked together to create 3 different infographics that were distributed through the Equestrian Canada website in the COVID resources section. The first infographic portrays details on how barn owners can safely facilitate visits from equine service providers such as vets, farriers, and body workers. The second infographic has general COVID safety tips and tricks on staying safe in your day-to-day life. But we all know that barns are a unique environment and we need something a little bit more relevant. This is where the third infographic comes in. It gives information on how to help prevent the spread of COVID-19, specifically in a barn environment. The information presented in all 3 of these infographics will help keep the barn safe for you, your staff, and anybody else who comes to your facility. Another project we worked on regarding biosecurity was a stocking density calculator. This tool is an Excel sheet and was created to help determine how many people can safely be in a designated space based on the government guideline to stay 2 meters or 6 feet apart from others. The tool has different sections for barn aisles, the tack room, and for another space of your choosing. All you have to do is input the area of your space in either meters squared or feet squared, and it will output the number of recommended people that can safely physically distance in that space. This resource can also be found on the Equestrian Canada website under the COVID-19 resources tab.
Doing research and creating these resources was a great start, but we wanted to get a better idea of where the lesson barn community as a whole sat within Ontario, as they were undoubtedly faced with some of the greatest struggles in this pandemic. They were left with no source of income and many mouths to feed for months on end. We decided that an anonymous survey would be the best method of collecting information. In the past, we had been keeping an eye on Facebook pages such as the For the Herd Emergency Fundraiser Facebook group, but we wanted a more comprehensive look than Facebook comments could give us. Elizabeth created the survey with a variety of questions asking barn owners how they were faring with the COVID-19 pandemic, asking how they were mitigating risk at their own facilities and what their overall outlook was on the situation. We received responses from 72 barns in Ontario and a few along the Quebec border. A complete write-up of these results, as well as an analysis of what they mean for the horse community, was written by myself and Dr. Merkes, and has been submitted for publication to the scientific journal Animals in their special issue entitled Impact of COVID-19 on Animal Management and Welfare. Some key COVID protocols that were reported across the board were reduced sizes of lesson groups, disinfecting of high-touch areas such as doorknobs regularly, limiting access to certain areas of the barns such as tack rooms, and scheduling rides so there were never more than 10 people on the property. Do keep in mind this survey was distributed during phase 2 of reopening when the gathering limit was 10 people in Ontario. Shockingly, only 9% of survey respondents included wearing face masks inside as part of their COVID safety procedures, despite recommendations from the CDC to always wear a face mask when indoors to prevent the spread of COVID. These numbers may look different now, as many municipalities have put new rules into effect regarding face mask usage since the survey was distributed in July, but this figure of just 9% reminds us just how important proper education is to help prevent the spread of COVID. As Catherine Wilson and Mike King spoke about earlier this week, barns should be doing everything they can now to protect themselves from legal trouble later on.
Moving into how we got the word out about the research and resources made available to the people in the equine community. Multiple forms of publication were used in order to ensure the most exposure was possible. The first press release was published in June. It was all about the EIS and what we were doing over the summer. It spoke of the research we did, including infographics, various interviews we conducted, and all the resources created available to the community. The second press release was published in late August, and this one was all about bringing horse communities together. Using the information gathered from interviews and research, we expanded on all the positives that have come out of this pandemic. Subjects such as community reinforcements and coming together to help each other out were discussed. Both these press releases were published in various magazines and newsletters. Another outlet for the resources we helped research and create was the Health and Welfare Conference Call put on by Equestrian Canada that took place on June 10th, where industry professionals talked about the impact of COVID in our horse communities. Discussed were changes and adjustments they implemented into their business. Most also shared helpful advice, resources, and information that they have learned from this experience to help others. The Equine Information Source presented a PowerPoint much like this one about the resources we found and created to help everyone in the equine industry. An essential part of our research were interviews with industry professionals, getting firsthand accounts on how the industry as a whole and how individuals were faring with all the changes happening to and around them. Kaylee and I took the time to research and contact those who would have useful information to share, and we took on the role as interviewers. But the brains behind the beauty of the videos was, of course, our teammate Elizabeth, who spent hours editing the videos into what we have posted on the BBRM YouTube channel now.
Our YouTube channel can be found by searching BBRM Equine Management on YouTube. The channel contains all of our interview videos with available closed captioning, as well as some educational videos we created about preventing the spread of COVID in barns. We interviewed many professionals within various sects of the industry to create educational content for horse owners on a variety of topics. We interviewed Dr. Paul Sharp about managing your pasture in a way that's efficient and affordable, as well as managing hay shortages and winter feeding strategies. We spoke with Peter Iranto about farrier work during COVID-19 and Dr. Emily Zakrajek about veterinary work during COVID-19, and discuss with both of these individuals where horse owners can cut corners in these areas and save money without sacrificing their horses' welfare. We spoke with Catherine Wilson, who you heard speak earlier this week, about legal advice for barn owners and equine businesses, and we spoke with Julie McCormick and Constance Dagan from TD Agricultural Services and Farm Credit Canada about financial advice for barn owners. Shalisa Saddlery also helped us create educational videos about saddle fit and how long periods of horses being off of work, such as 3 months of lockdown, can impact saddle fit. All of our videos are under 10 minutes for quick watching and are full of helpful tips, tricks, and additional resources on these topics. Our interviews also included public interest pieces. We spoke with Ontario's very own Jen Sweet about her work in founding the For the Herd emergency fundraiser, as well as Susan Jameson and Suzanne Miller about their mascara fundraiser with Red Scarf Equestrian, and Ashley Shattuck and Kate Lloyd about their COVID relief charity plan. We also spoke with Willa Gauthier of the Royal Horse Show about the decision to cancel the Royal and adapting to new alternative content that the Royal offered online this year. Finally, we spoke with Sabrina Ibanez, the Secretary General of the FEI, about how COVID-19 has impacted equestrian competition on the global scale. Overall, it was an extremely rewarding experience to work on this project. It was really incredible to see how the horse community came together to weather this pandemic as one. Help was offered freely, resources and knowledge were shared, and support from others could be found everywhere you looked. If anything, the COVID-19 pandemic has proved that horse people are some of the strongest and most resilient individuals out there. As long as we have our collective love of horses to draw us together, we're confident that our community can weather anything life has to throw at us. We just wanted to take a minute to thank a few groups in particular who helped our team succeed this summer. Equine Guelph worked in partnership with us to create and distribute these resources to as many individuals as possible within the horse community in Canada, particularly those involved with the For the Herd campaign. We're also grateful to Ontario Equestrian and Equestrian Canada for their support of our work and their assistance with its publication and distribution. And finally, we would like to give a huge thank you to our incredible supervising professor, Dr. Katrina Merkes, who made this all possible. Thank you all to you, the equestrian community, for continuing to rally and never giving up no matter how difficult things get. Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you, Kaylee, Amanda, and Elizabeth of the Equine Information Source for sharing with us the firsthand experiences you gained while conducting this research. As a token of our thanks and appreciation for your time and effort, a donation of $50 will be donated to For the Herd in your name.
Thank you.
We are now joined by Frederic Seppey. Frederic is the Assistant Deputy Minister for the Market and Industry Services branch at Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. His responsibilities include trade negotiations, agriculture and agri-food sectoral competitiveness, and departmental regional offices. Earlier in his career, Frederic held several management positions with Agriculture Canada, notably as Canada's chief agriculture negotiators. And I can say as a quick aside, in my own life, I've witnessed agricultural negotiations, and I've participated in negotiations between the Israelis and Palestinians. The agriculture negotiations are worse. He has also worked at the Canadian section of the Canada-US Regulatory Cooperation Council. During his career in the public service, Mr. Seppey has also worked at the Department of Foreign Affairs and International Trade, the Privy Council Office, the Department of Finance, and the Treasury Board Secretariat. So it is quite a global view of the public service. He will speak to us about the hydra-headed beast that is the Government of Canada, about the government's approach to helping Canadians make it through the pandemic, and how this affects us as horse people. Thank you, Frederic, for joining us, and especially as an ADM, I think we all recognize that your time is subject to enormous pressures. We're grateful that you're sharing some of that time with us, especially late on a Friday evening.
Thank you very much, Akaash, for your presentation. And thank you for the kind introduction. And I must say that perhaps the agriculture negotiator are worse, but the stakes are not as high as the kind of negotiations you were involved in. But I appreciate the comment. And it's a great pleasure tonight to be with all of you. And I must say that I found very interesting the presentation that I heard since 7 o'clock Eastern. And I felt it was very important for myself, and members of my team have followed the symposium since it started earlier this week. We don't have often occasions in my area to engage with the sector, a larger group of equine stakeholders. In my remark, I want to talk a little bit about the sector and discuss the government approach on engaging with industry during COVID and some of the lessons we learned. And building, I'm very pleased to follow Kristy House in a very insightful presentation that she made. There's definitely a recognition of the importance that the sector, the horse industry is playing in its contribution to the Canadian economy, both from a financial perspective, but also the societal importance it plays. In communities where you operate, you play a key role. Directly or indirectly, you would support a broad set of local jobs, economic activities. Often, Kristy will mention that and you mentioned several times, data is king. What the economic data shows is that it supports more than 154,000 jobs across the country, including 30,000 full-time jobs that are directly dedicated to the care of horses. But as Kristy often points out, many statistics are incomplete, underreported, and we need to multiply probably by a factor of 4 the data that I just mentioned. And it's true, as Kristy and Tracey presented, that the equine industry is not a traditional agriculture stakeholders, as opposed to, let's say, dairy or cattle or horticulture. I can reassure you, however, that our department make all the efforts possible to engage with your sector, and that has never been more true than in the past 7 months of the pandemic. There has been a unique intensification of that dialogue. We understand that your sector is composed of many segments, has unique challenges. The role of my team, I'm in charge of business development, but it's not only the pure business elements that we look at. We take a sectoral perspective at things to ensure that not only we understand the situation of the various sector, but we take the steps if we don't have the expertise, if we don't have the responsibility, to go the additional step to make sure that we can help you navigate through the maze of the government. I think that the theme of your symposium on resilience is very appropriate in these uncertain times. Over the last 8 months, the COVID-19 has been extremely challenging for the whole society, and for both the government and the industry. I never thought that I would be able to conduct all my operations from my home office. And it's incredible to see, first of all, how it affected the various sectors unevenly, but the resilience is impressive. Businesses had to deal with physical distancing, public health measures, acquiring and finding the right protective personal equipment, quarantine requirements. So in that context, being able to discuss with representative of your sector, especially through Equestrian Canada, has been extremely important to have a good understanding of the situation, how the pandemic was affecting your activities. and we know that on the top of the pandemic, issues such as the drought in Eastern Canada would have affected many of the operators and in the sector. So how did the government reacted to that? Of course, when the whole sector is affected by these factors, the government has focused very much on trying to help and address the needs of the citizens. But of course, the business needs were very important. So a number of financial programs have been announced. Change have been made to existing programs. So just to make reference to a number, of course, there's programs such as the Canadian Business Account, for example, that has been put in place to help businesses. Recently, it has been modified to take into account the fact that many operators, and I don't know if it's the case in the horse sector, many operators don't have necessarily a business account, and that was a requirement until very recently, where the the Department of Finance has changed the rules to reflect the message that many stakeholders in our area, in our sector, have made, and therefore has accepted that if you have established a business account after March 1st, when the program started, you could apply to the program. So that's just one element, one example of a program. I want to talk about, although the challenges continue, I want to draw a number of lessons that we learned. First, we heard that we have to be consistent in terms of messaging. We know that the industry was affected by the fact that early in the pandemic, between the federal government and various provincial governments, were not always fully aligned in terms of the definition of essential services and public health guidance, or the timing of issuing such guidance. And that contributes to confusion, and it has a real impact on business activities or your operations. So there's a need to better coordinate and align our communication and messaging going forward. And we have taken steps, for example, working with the Public Health Agency of Canada, the Canadian Centre for Occupational Health and Safety, and learning to work with regional public health authorities, such as like in Peel, for example, with the restrictions that were announced today. Well, this is a very important region where the public authority has the final word. We need to learn to work with local public health authorities. At the federal level also, we had to learn to develop new partnership across the departments to deal with challenges such as those that Kristy presented earlier in the symposium. We felt that, like as a department dealing with agriculture and agri-food, which is more than the farming and the food, having a way to establish a dialogue with the equine sector would help to address novel emerging challenges. Data availability, I mentioned it earlier, and Kristy and Tracey made, and the great project from the students at the University of Guelph in terms of data. This is really an element where there's a missing link, and we need to remedy that, be able to share information quickly. So this is something that in our future relationship with the equine sector, we'll want to go deeper into that. Of course, one solution doesn't fit all, and we know that some segment of the equine sector will be more affected than others, and that's why working both at the national level and at the level of provincial organization, as Tracey presented, is very important. And in fact, agriculture being an area of shared jurisdiction, we have mechanisms, vehicles, we engage, for example, ministers of agriculture of Canada and the provinces and territories met for 4 hours this afternoon, and I must say that the level of collaboration is greater than ever again. So by working at the national level with Equestrian Canada, but also at the level of provincial organization, you can achieve a better understanding, better education of the policymakers, as well as being able to address specific needs that may be specific to a region. A number of programs exist, and there's programs that are not necessarily specific to the equine sector that have been put in place, or funding that has been provided that is of interest to the equine sector. I'm thinking, for example, under Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada Agri-Insurance Program. There has been funding that has been provided in 2019 up to $4.6 million that helped to support transportation code of practice for the care and handling of farm animals during transportation. I know that there is representative of your sector that are on the council that administer that. So these are examples of financial programs. And I would close by saying that an area where more can be done as well is the research that on issues of importance to the equine sector. These are areas that we can go deeper in a dialogue with the sector. And again, Kristy mentioned a number of the group that exists, the working group that exists with on equine issues. We are pleased to help in terms of dealing with issues such as a revision of definition of what is a business under the tax law. These are like uphill battles, challenging matters to handle, but we are more than happy to accompany the sector in addressing these issues. So again, thank you very much for inviting me to provide the perspective from the department and the lesson learned. I would be more than happy to hear any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Frederic. On your almost last point about the business status of equine facilities, I can't help but wonder to myself, what would you have said when you were back at Treasury Board or at Finance Canada to Frederic, who came to you from Agriculture Canada to plead the case for the equine sector? But I'll put that aside for the time being. We now have about 5 minutes for questions from the audience. Somewhere on your screen, depending on what platform you use, there should be a button that's labeled Q&A. Please do type in your questions there, and our colleagues at the University of Guelph will sort through them and put them to Frederic. While you are typing away, I will see the first question to get us started. And Frederic, you mentioned that one of the imperatives and one of the benefits of the government's need to respond collectively and swiftly to the pandemic is that there has been interdepartmental and federal provincial cooperation. And certainly the idea that marshalling all of our forces is necessary for a complex society touches the horse sector very carefully, very closely. We obviously have an agricultural component, a strong agricultural component, but we also cross over many other federal portfolios, such as sport, heritage, export promotion, taxation, rural economic development, diversity in youth, and intergovernmental affairs. We're probably not going to see a Minister of Horse anytime soon. So in that context, are there things that horse people and the horse sector can do to try to ensure that our interests are championed across federal portfolios instead of running the risk of falling between the cracks of those portfolios?
Yeah, thank you very much, Akaash, for the question. And I think that one thing that we learned in the recent months, the experience working with Kristy as a key representative in the equine sector, is that it can be a maze for many outside stakeholders, the government. So we're very pleased to provide AFC as a path for a point of entry for the industry into the federal government. We have equine specialists that can liaise with other departments. We are more than happy to do that. In my branch, often we deal with issues that are outside our area of responsibilities, but we will facilitate bringing these issues to the attention of other departments. And also they will seek our advice in terms of, and sometimes they will be able to share element of information with us about policies, and we can facilitate. We cannot transmit that information, but we can at least assemble that with information we get from stakeholders, and then help perhaps to move the goalpost. So that's an illustration of that. So, and that's why we feel that on our side, we hope it's useful for the equine sector, this working group that Kristy was mentioning. We think it's very useful as well, because it helped to bring together the issues that are important for a sector, and then try to sort out, okay, how can we develop an approach to address these measures? So that would be my reaction. And Akaash, if you allows me, I see that on the Q's and A's, there's a question about the whether AFC has a philosophical objection to have equestrian facilities considered as farms from a tax definition purpose. And I must say, I started my career in tax policy, so I'm a bit familiar with these challenges. I think that one element, the challenge is not the philosophical, are you in favor or not philosophically? The challenge is that when you have such broad impact policy tools at your disposal, equity, logic, a rationale is very important. Changing the scope of a definition can have enormous unintended effect. But it's not to say that we cannot go deep and analyze it to see if is the solution and a change in the definition of the tax definition, or is there other ways to achieve the same outcome without touching a lever that is so powerful in a sense. But definitely that's a question that on which we are more than happy to engage deeper with representative of the sector.
So before I turn matters over to Sarah, who will read out some more questions, let me put you on the spot. If you were back at Treasury or at Finance, what would you need to hear from your colleague, your future self at Agriculture Canada to convince you?
I think that it would be well, it would be that it's an issue that has implications or well, I think that if I would be at finance, I would ask, will there be an impact on the tax base, on the fiscal revenues? That's one element. But also it's about the fact that it would not create unintended precedents that would extend unreasonably the scope of the measures. In tax policy, people are extremely rigorous in terms of these principle based. It's not philosophical objective. It is principle, and it's the logic of the tax systems. So I think, but through dialogues, what I see is that compared to the years I was there 20 or almost 30 years ago, there's more open minds in terms of considering a solid case that is presented. But again, we have also you have to be mindful about or open to alternative ways of addressing the same objective. That would be my reaction.
So thank you, Mr. Seppey, for sharing your insight on COVID-19 and the equine industry and highlighting the government's efforts in this area. As a token of our thanks and appreciation for your time and effort, a donation of $50 will be donated to For the Herd in your name.
Thank you very much.
I've now been given the task to try to summarize the past week in a minute or two. And that, of course, is a bit of a fool's errand, so I'll do it quickly, if not competently. More than anything else, of course, I'd like to thank our speakers and our organizers for putting together the symposium this year, as they have done every year for the past 4 or 5 years. Now, we've had 5 days of speakers and discussions. We've had an overview of the effects of the pandemic on Canadian horses, horse people, and the horse community. We've received advice from financial professionals on measures horse facilities can take to prepare to weather the coming winter. We've heard the perspective of equine insurers on what they can, will, and will not do to mitigate risks. We discussed ways of assessing, understanding, and protecting horse welfare from the paddock through to end-of-life care. We heard how equine traceability operates in the United Kingdom and Equine Canada's ambitions to create an analogous system here in Canada. And tonight we have heard from the institutions who regulate our sector and who are responsible for offering us competent governance and public accountability, both from the government side and from the association side. Needless to say, these are all difficult issues and deep waters, which is precisely why the students and faculty members at the University of Guelph have chosen them for this week of discussions. If there's one thing I think has come out of this, it is that, well, of course, I hope that these discussions will be useful to everyone who joined us this week, and that the institutions that represent us will have gained a stronger sense of who we are and what our interests are. But I also think that the lesson has come out of this is that the pandemic itself and the proceedings of this week really have laid bare the extent to which we are all in one another's hands. We have risen to the challenge to the extent that we've been able to work together, and we have suffered needlessly to the extent that we have not done that. We've seen some excellent examples of the fruits of collaboration. The For the Horse initiative, which started off as a private initiative by one committed and very energetic volunteer, and which was then taken over and expanded by a provincial association. We've seen collaborations between the national and provincial equestrian federations, which have in the past suffered from all of the same sorts of stresses that one sees in a federated system of government. And I think we've seen a willingness amongst equestrian institutions to acknowledge their internal weaknesses as a first step toward remedying them. If there is a positive that may come out of this, I think we've also glimpsed the potential of better ways of organizing ourselves to lead our community, and that the pandemic has been an extraordinary shock to our systems, both as Canadians and as Canadian host people. And that may be the shock whose positive effects will be the opportunity to reach forward into those new systems of organizing ourselves. I mean, there's people often say the narcissism of small differences between different sports and different agricultural sectors. I do think it is fair to say that one of the defining features of the equestrian sector is that we have very ancient roots. Indeed, as a community, we have roots that are as old as civilization itself. We have literally seen off war and famine, and I think we will see off pestilence in the form of coronavirus. We will do so for the same reasons that we have always been able to emerge intact in the past, and that is that we will find ways to pull together, even if we must physically stand apart. This week was a very dense week of discussions, and it can only be thought of as the beginning of our efforts. I understand that the University of Guelph will be publishing the videos online afterwards. We hope that they will serve as a resource to everyone who is part of the sector on an ongoing basis. And I also hope that some of the relationships that we have heard that have been built throughout the course of this symposium will carry on and will bear additional fruit in the years to come. I know that, for example, Frederic's kind offer to act as a champion for our sector across government will be exploited mercilessly by all of us here. So thank you, Frederic. Again, thank you to the students and to the faculty members for organizing this symposium, for having the courage to stick their head into the lion's mouth, because there's no denying that as host people, we can be a difficult community, but we are difficult because we believe passionately in the choices we have made to be host people. And it is that passion, I think, that will ensure that we survive the pandemic. And now I will turn matters over to our colleagues.
While the Equine Information Source was conducting interviews, we made sure to ask the question, have you seen any positive impacts or outcomes from the COVID-19 pandemic? We have created a short video and we would like to share it with you that includes clips of the positive impacts that our interviewees had mentioned. What are some positive impacts you have seen come from the pandemic?
We've seen a lot of increased interest in horseback riding because a lot of other recreational activities and programs are closed down.
The fundraiser that was put out by OEF for the herd, we want to make sure that, you know, our lesson horses are fed, our schoolies are taken care of, and things like that.
But it was great to see how many people stepped up to help the riding school horses and donated to the school when we asked for help. So that
the For the Herd campaign, the amount of awareness that got, the offers of help from all, you know, grassroots right up to top professionals, and donations. And it was just, the lesson barns definitely took a hit. And so it was really nice to see the whole community kind of band together and try to help them get through this.
Yeah, actually, one of the kind of the unsung heroes of this is going to be a lot of these school horses that have been working really hard for a long time are finally going to get a little break, and this will just give them the time to hopefully let some some of these niggling injuries kind of heal up and give them a bit longer lease on life.
It gave all of the horses a chance to have some downtime, especially the lesson horses that, I could never afford to give them 2 months off otherwise.
I would say that the COVID-19 pandemic, as bad as it's been, has given us the opportunity to really pull together as an industry. So a lot of people within the equine industry have really reached out to help each other and join together in all of this. And
bright side to the pandemic is just the great sense of community that we have in our industry here.
About everyone kind of coming together and really trying to help each other out and be there for each other and make sure that everyone's still in good spirits. And
I think the pandemic is bringing people together and helping us recognize just, how much it takes a village for any one of us to successfully succeed in life. We all need help. And if we can give it this time, that's great. Because there'll be another time when we need it. It's just an ebb and flow of caring and energy and resources. And it's a wonderful thing to see.
Well, I think the community is everything. I think the number of emails I've gotten, just, it's so nice to know we're not alone. I think that is so key. I think we all tend to work a bit in a vacuum. I think it's really essential that people connect, especially through something like this, and realize that you're not alone and brainstorm solutions. And I think that's happened. And I think that that's so key. And I hope that that can carry forward, that connection within the industry, because I think it just makes us stronger as an industry. I think we can really help each other. I don't know, I just think it matters.
Thank you. We will now have an open question and answer period, so feel free to type in your questions in the question and answer box. The first question is for Frederic Seppey, sorry. Could we get help from AASC with facility insurance? Coverage was difficult to obtain and farmers have the same issue with livestock buildings and hay storage buildings.
Thank you, Sarah, for bringing this question to my attention. I would have to get back to you on this because it depends on the nature of the help in terms. What do you mean by help with the facility insurance? There may be some elements of that can be covered by existing programs, but I would have to consult with my colleagues in the area. I think that through the working group and through Kristy, we can surely look further into this. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is for anyone who would like to answer. I asked this question earlier in this week. For the Herd was an excellent and innovative, but we couldn't go beyond the industry because there was no chargeable donation receipts. What are the barriers to establish a charitable arm somewhere so we can continue to raise funds for welfare issues beyond the equestrian industry?
There are opportunities to work with charities. The University of Guelph, actually, we had potential to work with the university. They were really forthcoming and helpful. It was the speed at which we had to put the whole campaign together. It's a big undertaking to get charitable status. So as a provincial sport governing body, we're better to work with. I think Equestrian Canada also has charitable status, but there's a lot of guidelines around how the money can be spent. So going forward, we're better to work with other partners rather than try to get one ourselves, just because we have limited staff and limited resources, and it's a very big undertaking.
Thank you, Tracey. The next question is for Kristy. You said that Equestrian Canada sees itself as seeking for the entire horse community. However, EC has had no voting members from racial moderators for many years now. How can these Canadian horse people make their voices heard?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but I mean, the category C representatives are the industry affiliates, and they do have voting privileges, 9 votes to be exact. But I think there's lots of methods of getting issues and bringing forward concerns from the industry. One is most certainly the Equine Industry Development Committee. Their full mandate is to work on and address issues that are impacting the industry across the board, and that's not one sector specific or one discipline specific, but that's down at the farm business level. So that would be the one recommendation. But I think this is part of the path forward that we're establishing, is how do we get a better system for bringing forward these issues. I think it's also important to recognize your provincial organization or your PTSO in your province as a conduit for communication, as they do communicate with us regularly, and we are going to be trying to expand on how we support the industry and make sure that we are having those touch points.
Thank you, Kristy. And our next question is for anyone who would like to answer. Are there any government programs to assist entrepreneurs launch a career in the equestrian area, as in areas such as equine massage, PEMF therapy, farrier, etc.?
I don't know specifically. I mean, government goes in and out of supporting new businesses. So I'm sure there are some. I'm not familiar with them, but I'm sure there generally are a few programs to launch new businesses or incubators to launch new businesses, but I'm not familiar with them. They're probably not equine specific, but new businesses are usually supported through different programs.
From my perspective, it may be interesting to look at Farm Credit Canada, because I think they cover some aspects of the equine sector. Will it cover these types of activities? Kristy, you may know better than I do. Thanks.
So I'm not going to give a definitive yes or no, but you did touch on exactly what I was going to recommend. As much as we've been in conversations with AAFC, we do have, we had initial ongoing conversations with FCC, which would be Farm Credit Canada. But additionally, there are lots of opportunities, agriculture specific opportunities through some of the larger banks as well. So if you head to the Equestrian Canada website and have a look at the COVID-19 resources, we do have a specific column around financial resources. Again, based on not knowing exactly what FCC would cover, but they are very flexible and they are very open to equestrian businesses. So it's definitely worth a conversation with them to begin with.
Thank you. Our last question is for Kristy. Can you please clarify if riding schools have to close down with today's lockdown in Peel and Toronto? And are riding schools defined as indoor or outdoor sports facilities in your work with the government?
I'm going to lead off by saying this information is very fresh. I'm not comfortable in making a full interpretation at this point. I would recommend that you have a look through the act that is available through the government resources. As it is a provincial based matter, I will be supporting Tracey and her team as they weed through what's been released today. Obviously, due diligence of Equestrian Canada is always to seek legal advice, but from a Friday evening recommendation, I can recommend that you reach out to your public health, that you reach out to your insurance provider, and that you pay attention to Ontario Equestrian communication channels for further information. Like I said, I haven't had a full chance to fully review, so I'm not willing to make a confident comment on that, but there are outdoor aspects to riding facilities, so that's definitely, you know, pretty clarified, but I would say that there'll be more information to come as soon as possible, but we received the information at the same time that everybody else did, so I'm not confident in making a full interpretation at this point. I don't know if Tracey, you want to build on that, but I think we're probably on the same page.
Yeah, no, we've gotten all the information from our lawyers, and we have the information from the government, but I haven't had time to go through it yet. So we will be communicating, but you know, the best resource is to read the information yourself as well and to talk to your public health, because we're interpreting the same way you are. So we are talking to lawyers and getting further clarification, but what we learned through the first wave of the pandemic was that it's very localized, and you really need to be in touch with local public health as well.
Thank you, Kristy, and thank you, Tracey. This is going to wrap up our Q&A, and I will pass it back over to Nikki.
So we have some incredible prizes to win through our raffle, from hay bags to trail rides generously donated by companies such as Tapestry Equine Products, Ontario Equestrian, the Grey Horse Candle Company, and many more. So the raffle tickets are earned by completing the pre-symposium survey, attendance during the week, asking questions, and donating to For the Herd that include names and emails. The raffle draw will take place on Monday, November 23rd, and the winners will be announced after via email. For our feedback survey announcement, we before the end of the night, we want to encourage everybody to fill out the feedback survey for the symposium this year, which will be emailed to you today. You will also receive another raffle ticket upon completing the feedback survey. We look forward to hearing from your opinions this year's symposium and all the topics we covered during the week.
This marks the end of the 2020 Equine Industry Symposium, where we focused on the impacts of COVID-19 on businesses and welfare, overcoming these struggles, and making sure we can be better prepared for any similar events in the future. On behalf of myself and the rest of the second-year equine management class, I would like to give a big thank you to the speakers and moderators that participated throughout the week, who graciously gave their time to share insight into the topics discussed each night and help to make the week run smoothly and efficiently. I would also like to thank the organizing committee, Katrina Merkes, Peter Physics-Sheard, Renee Bergeron, Gail Ecker, Teresa Rondo-Vuk, Jonathan Schmidt, Tracey McCague-McElrae, Brandon Hall, Jamie Martin, and Kiana McDowell, who not only helped to plan the event, but allowed us to continue the tradition of the Equine Industry Symposium while abiding by COVID-19 safety precautions. Lastly, I would like to give a big thank you to everyone who joined us via Zoom this week, who helped make this year's symposium a success. Despite not being able to gather at the scenic University of Guelph campus in Ontario, Canada, we appreciate your interest and dedication to our event and hope you will take away some valuable information surrounding COVID-19 and the effects on the equine community. A reminder that the recordings of the symposium sessions this week will be available on the Horse portal. And thank you again for joining us, and we hope to see you all next year at the 2021 Equine Industry Symposium.